This is Film Talk, where we interview the brightest minds in filmmaking 5 days a week. Do you need a great camera for your next shoot? You may want to consider the world's lightest handheld Super 35 digital film camera, Blackmagic's Ursa Mini 4.6K. The Ursa Mini boasts a 4.6K sensor, global shutter, and up to 15 stops of dynamic range. It's perfectly balanced for handheld use and comfortable enough to be used all day long. Scene 1, take 1. Film Talk Nation, we are greenlit for yet another great show. Vanessa Frank here, and I'm excited to bring you our featured guest today, Chris Vogler. Chris, are you ready for your close-up?
Yes.
Chris Vogler is an internationally known development executive who's worked for Disney, Warner Brothers, Fox, and many other major studios and production companies. As a veteran story consultant for major Hollywood film companies and a respected teacher of filmmakers and writers around the globe, his book, The Writer's Journey, has become an international bestseller, a modern classic, and required reading for countless executives and film students. Since publication, The Writer's Journey has influenced scores of screenplays, including those of The Lion King, Fight Club, Black Swan, and Noah. Chris remains a highly sought-after consultant to major studios and actors. Students of his work include Oscar-winning screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin and Oscar-nominated screenwriter-director Darren Aronofsky. Chris, it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much.
So, Chris, I would love to know how you first got started in this industry. Obviously, people know you for the incredible consultant and expert that you are today. But going all the way back, how did you first make your initial footsteps into this industry?
Well, it was a long road. I'm all about the journey, and it's a long one for me because I started as a farm boy, literally, in Missouri. But every step of the way, I just was trying to get closer to the hot center of films that were so important to me as a kid. So I went to journalism school first, then I got into the Air Force, and in the Air Force, I was lucky. They sent me to make films out in Los Angeles for the space program, and that got me out here and on the West Coast. Then on the GI Bill, they pay you if you complete your service. They give you some money to go to school, and so I went to the USC Film School, University of Southern California, and a couple of things happened there that really helped propel me. I took a class called Story Analysis, and that kind of gave me a job pathway into the industry and showed me, how it all works. George Lucas's film Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, came out about a week after I had read a book by a man named Joseph Campbell called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So it all tied together and led me to getting into the movie business as a reader of scripts and someone who writes reports and tells them, whether they should spend their time on it, and if it's worth their time, what is not quite right and needs to be fixed. So it turned out I was good at that, and I quickly moved up, got into the union. There was a union for this. At that time, it was called the Story Analyst Guild. Now it's part of the Editors Guild. And, then worked myself up a little bit higher in the chain as someone who can analyze scripts very thoroughly. I had an intensity about it and a good work ethic, so I was able to really dig deep on things, and they found my opinion valuable. So that's how I worked my way in.
So obviously, The Writer's Journey is a highly acclaimed work of yours. What was the genesis of that book?
Well, I had been looking as a kid even. I was looking for, in every industry there's a guidebook or a rule book or a set of principles or something behind it, and I looked for that, and I couldn't find anything. When I went to film school, there were very few film writing books about how to write a screenplay. It was very early days for that in the mid-'70s. And so I realized, somebody might have to write this book, and it might be me, especially with this mythological point of view that I got from the work of Joseph Campbell. And so I wrote a paper, actually, for a class while I was still in college, in graduate school, about Star Wars particularly, but also Close Encounters and a few other films that had this Campbell paradigm or this sort of structural skeleton in them, and I felt that was important for the industry because it was something that people were becoming conscious of it, and it was extremely valuable for doing films on a worldwide scale where you need to communicate across cultures. This was something that was so culturally broad and so deep that it made it a lot easier. So I wrote a short memo when I worked at Disney, about 7 pages long, explaining all of this, why Campbell's work was important, what were the elements of his outline, and that thing just spread like wildfire across the industry before the internet on fax and various other hand-carried across town Xerox machines. It really propagated itself very quickly like a virus through the whole industry. And, it was written succinctly enough, cleanly enough that people got it. And that's something I had learned in the studio system, to write effectively and efficiently. And so it made the idea travel very well. So I was very well set up when it was time to make the book. A lot of people in the business already knew about it, and it had a certain acceptance already.
Chris, obviously you have built a career on training some of the finest writers in our industry to become the best at what they do. What are the daily practices that you believe writers should be engaging in daily to hone their craft?
Well, I think I got a big note from a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And this is something that helps you overcome a lot of the obstacles that we put in our own way. And one of the best breakthroughs in that book is the idea of just doing something she calls daily pages. You write something every day, and this actually strengthens the muscles in your hands and the eye-to-hand coordination, and it just becomes a habit to write something. And it doesn't have to be, apropos to your project at hand. I just write down what's going on in my life, but I also use this ongoing long diary that's I've kept for years and years, a work diary, I call it. And in there I put notes for upcoming scenes, problems I'm having. I just use it to sort of talk to myself on paper, and it keeps me sharp because it's something I demand of myself every single day.
Chris, evidently you have worked with writers, producers, directors, executives across a very wide range of material. What do you feel are the most important elements that producers, directors, film executives should be looking for when optioning source material to adapt?
Well, I think there's really a number of things, especially these days, where we're leaning so much towards big epics and long form and very extravagant big productions on one end of the scale anyway. And there, I think you need to look for something that has a world, okay, that has a world we want to go to, something new, something a little bit maybe parallel to ours but a little different. That's important. Compelling characters are important. But for the producer's point of view, one of the biggest things is you have to be able to smell a story. You have to know somehow intuitively this is a story. And a lot of people don't. They write entire screenplays and don't understand what a story really is. They've got scenes, they've got characters, but it isn't really a story. And that's kind of an inner sense that's developed by reading a lot of scripts, basically. As most producers have, that's part of the job. So after a while, you begin to get that sense. When you look at something that isn't a script, a piece of history, somebody's life, some newspaper article, a magazine article that you see, that you develop an ability to say that there could be a story in that, and it has the right elements, the ups and downs in somebody's life, the turning points in history, those kind of things indicate the possibility of a good story.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that that kind of the smelling of the story, to use your words,
Yes.
is more so a skill that is developed over time as one is exposed to great writing, as opposed to kind of, an innate gift that you either have or don't have.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I had that, but that wasn't out of nothing. I had it because I had had stories read to me when I was a kid, fairy tales read to me by my mother and my grandmother, and that was really deeply grooved. And I watched and admired a lot of films as a kid, and watched a lot of TV as a kid. And so I had that inner sense of things, like a vibration.
Yeah.
Everything. I'm sort of an old hippie who speaks about good vibrations and that sort of thing. And I really felt that way, that certain stories would make me shake inwardly, just like, oh, with excitement. And there's a certain thrill that you get. And you don't get that when somebody is just talking there's a genre of films that I call, um, you know, uh, dreary dramas where people are just talking and nothing's happening, I like a certain balance of action and dialogue, and these kind of things are intuitive because it's really hard to explain what all that is, and I think it only comes from reading a lot of scripts, seeing a lot of movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely be inclined to agree with you. And actually, there's a book I'm trying to remember who the author was. Oh, Malcolm Gladwell. There's a book called Blink,
Yeah.
which very have. Sorry, I have a bit of a frog in my throat today. Have you had an opportunity to read Blink?
Oh yes, I think I
Yeah,
did read that. Yeah,
yeah.
and
It
I'm
kind
I'm
of
a big admirer of Gladwell. Yeah.
Yes, so it kind of discusses this idea of that, some of the best experts in their various fields are people who've so indoctrinated themselves in their area of expertise that they develop this inner sense that one could say, oh, well, it's just intuition, it's just a feeling in the gut. But in fact, it's actually it's the result of years and years and years of exposing themselves to that, to where an art expert can look at a piece of art and very quickly tell whether it's a fake or real, and it's very hard for others to understand how they do that, and it's just this practice, that ongoing practice of really bathing themselves in their skill, in their area. So it's very interesting to me that you would express that.
Yes, and there's something about the number 10,000 that keeps coming up in many disciplines, and it's in
The
Gladwell's
10,000
book.
hours, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I met someone who reads palms, a man from India, and he
Mm.
taught me about how to meditate and various other interesting things. But he said he didn't know anything or really understand it until he read 10,000 palms. And the same for me. When I had read 10,000 screenplays, my brain cracked open, and I had a completely different understanding. And then when years later, I read the next 10,000 screenplays, there was another kind of plateau that I got to where I could instantaneously detect the form of the story. My wife watches film with me, and I'll go, he's the killer right there. They just telegraphed who it is, and she'll go, how do you know? You've only seen 2 seconds of the movie. And I know, trust me,
Yeah.
because I've read 20,000 scripts.
Yeah, I'm quite a fan of the idea of watching a new movie every day. That just enables one to open themselves up to a wide array of different film styles. And
Yeah.
I think for directors, maybe that it's that equivalent to reading 10,000 screenplays. There's a lot to be said for watching thousands and thousands of movies. You definitely start seeing a lot of parallels.
Yeah, yeah. I know people in theater, and they do a discipline. They read a play every day,
Mm.
out loud or to themselves, and that will accumulate this kind of body of knowledge. It's great.
Yeah. So, Chris, in terms of the commercial side of it, obviously it's wonderful to write a great screenplay, but there comes a point in time when we want to get it optioned, we want to get it sold, and evidently we want to get it sold for as much money as possible. Is there anything that you can recommend to writers as a means of getting their script to stand out from the crowd?
That's interesting. To stand out from the crowd, you need the thing that would jump out to us when I was reading scripts in the studio system was, all these things we talked about, the good story and so forth, but there was something called a voice, a unique voice. And this would be maybe an attitude that's communicated on the page through the characters and the dialogue. Sometimes it's not in that; it's in the presentation of it. There was kind of a school of writing today that I think was influenced by Tarantino, where he often will address the reader directly and say, listen, man, strap yourself in, because this is going to be the most amazing chase scene you ever saw. Or if my mother's reading this, this is going to be a really hot, juicy love scene. So just skip the next couple of pages, and this kind of more conversational attitude. It's a trick, but it does make the day go a little faster.
So you actually don't mind those kind of side notes to the reader?
No, I just, you read so many scripts in the business that something that refreshes you, different people might react differently to it, but to me that sort of thing is refreshing because it says somebody's thinking about the form. And, it's a balance between there is a kind of standard and there is a way that we do things routinely and so forth, and there's a huge value to that. But being able to play with it, to be playful, is a desirable thing. It just makes everybody's day a little brighter.
It makes me think of, I know in the early 90s, there was kind of a big trend of, or certainly a trend of delivering scripts to executives in kind of novelty ways. And if memory serves me correctly, and I'm a little nervous about sharing this anecdote lest I be attributing it to the wrong person, but if memory serves me, I think like Snyder actually talks about a script, which I believe he ended up maybe optioning to Spielberg, that he had packaged in some kind of novelty packaging, and that I think there was quite a bit of that idea going around of, what is a stunt that we can pull that will kind of get the attention of executives when the script is delivered. Do you kind of like that idea, or do you think that's kind of cutesy?
No, it's cutesy, and I hate it. We saw some of that, and it was attention-getting. It was something that people would talk about, and they'd run up and down the halls and pass the word if somebody was putting on a show like that. There is a thing called showmanship, and it's valuable. But in the screenplay world, the screenplay, in some senses, it's an art form, but it's also a technical document, and the script should stand on its own. And so people will do all these things. Like, I remember once somebody was pitching a modern-day vampire story, and they said they were talking to me to get my thoughts about pitching it to a higher-up executive in my company. And they said, what we're going to do is get guys in full armor and with crossbows, and they'll come into the executive's office and point the crossbows at his heart and say, if you don't buy the script, the vampires will come and kill you. And I said, you wouldn't get past security. I mean, you won't even get on the lot, let alone come and threaten the life of one of the executives. I said, that will get attention, but it won't have the effect that you want. And,
I can imagine there's probably many frustrated writers who've had that fantasy moment, but hopefully none of them will be acting it out anytime soon.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Leave that to the fantasy, or put it in the script, but
yes.
not in reality.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, Chris, what do you think about the practice of hiring a different writer to rewrite someone else's work? Do you feel that it's a necessary evil, or do you feel that that original essence of the story is prone to getting lost?
Well, I think necessary evil is a great way to put it, because it is necessary sometimes. Writers run dry, even on their own ideas, or they run into limitations. It's something I observed, that people are limited by their own psychology. So if you are someone who avoids conflict, then you're not going to write conflict very well. If you're someone who has a lot of problems with men or women, you don't understand the other gender, then that's going to reflect in the writing. So sometimes you have to ease it gently out of the hands of one writer or team of writers and bring it to somebody else who has the certain skills that you need, because everybody in the system who's known to the studios, they're known for certain things, that this one can deliver great romantic dialogue, this one writes great scenes, this one can structure the whole thing overall, and it's rare when one writer has all of those skills in one package. The kind of saving grace of all this is that sometimes they realize we lost the essence that you were talking about, and we might even go back to the original writer and say, okay, we took it this way and that way, can you bring us back home again? And I like to see that, when there is that trust.
How do you feel? Obviously, I think a lot of us have seen that kind of horrendous scenario where a script ends up going through 5 or 6 or 7 different writers and becomes so far removed from the original intent of the script. And ironically, which is something that even happens oftentimes with scripts that have been optioned, where, the original writer is left kind of saying, well, I don't get it, because they liked it enough to buy it, and then they just completely turned it into something else. How does one protect the material from that kind of nightmare Frankenstein approach?
Well, it happened a couple of times that I've seen writers, or I've been in that situation myself, and there's a realization that comes in their head. They've changed it so much that it doesn't even touch any corner of the original thing anymore, and suddenly you're liberated because they've gone and made something else. I still have the original over here, and I can take that maybe and sell it someplace else or turn it into something else. And also, I have learned that I'm better through the process of collaboration, and I really fought that and didn't like that realization, but it's become very obvious to me that I'm just better when somebody else looks at it and has some input on it and maybe even writes a scene or two. It makes me look better. So I certainly have had coffee with many writers who suffer because they saw their thing go, so far off track. But sometimes they're also secretly glad because the movie did well, and that's the best scenario. That's the comfort that you can get out of it, I guess. You take what people do in that case is they take credit for the good parts. You like that part? That was my part. You didn't like that? Well, that's what those other guys did.
It's a very Hollywood approach.
That's right. Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts then on co-writing partnerships. I've always personally been very intrigued by how one makes that work, and whether it's actually a benefit or potentially a great hindrance, particularly if one makes their name in a career with a partnership that may or may not stand the test of time.
Right.
What are your thoughts on co-writing partnerships?
Well, they're very difficult. I've done it a number of ways. I've done it in the way where maybe I write a draft and rough something out, then I hand it to my writing partner or producer, and that person will go over it, maybe rewrite or make a lot of notes and then hand it back. That's one way. I've done it the way where you actually sit in the room, the way Billy Wilder and I.A.L. Diamond used to do, and the two guys just knock it out together and talk over every single line. That's really hard. But the most profitable thing has been working with a smart producer he's not going to write everything, but he's really in there and really understands story and tears it up and hands it back to you every day, and then you go back to your hotel room and rewrite and then come back and tear it up again. And that's painful as it can be, but it's the way to get the best result. When you're working with somebody who's got a tough mind and when you've got the mutual trust. So you knock each other down. So what? You get up and you go back.
I feel like it's almost like you would have to be a little bit in each other's minds. It almost feels like a marriage in some senses. You have to just become one person to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, there's this thing that it's very difficult to get the whole package into one human body, and I find this that I'm great with the vision of things. I see the whole Wagnerian picture of the whole 9-movie saga, and somebody else is this scene is just a little bit wobbly, and why are they even here? So those kind of fine detail things, that's not the first thing I think of, but other people do. And also the producers have, in my experience, are great about keeping their eye on the ball of who's the audience for this. And, both in terms of the actual audience that's going to see it and who are we going to sell it to. So the producers really help a lot in my experience, they help a lot to steer you towards, we have to sell this to a movie star, or we have to sell it to a studio, and this is what they want to see right now. So that kind of up-to-date information, too, is very helpful, because I live in a timeless universe, and the producers are more, on the ground, detecting what people are tired of, what the buyers are hungry for at this moment. So, I rely on somebody else for that.
There's a proverb that this very much makes me think of, which I believe is something down the lines of, if you want to travel somewhere fast, travel on your own. If you want to travel far, travel with others. And I think that that's definitely the case when it comes to the screenwriting process. It's obviously a lot less painful in some senses to not have it be a collaborative process. But if you really want to see a project go the distance, having those voices, I think, of the input of some great executives, a producer, a great consultant or analyst such as yourself, can make all the difference between a screenplay never getting optioned and it potentially going on to win a major award.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a diplomatic side to my kind of business where you are reacting to somebody's script and you're trying to tell them the hard truth about it without killing the creativity. And so you have to find ways. And I learned a lot of this from a great teacher, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who wrote notes on scripts when I was working at Disney. And I read his notes very carefully and respectfully because he did it in a diplomatic way. He would always sort of be self-effacing. He'd say, I don't really know what's the best thing here, but I have this feeling. Or he'd say, this is kind of a dumb suggestion. It's the most obvious thing, but I'm sure you can find a better solution. But I'm just trying to point out a problem. So there was a humility about it that I really admired, and respect for the writers and for the hard work that they do to get it to that point. So you're not completely just like wiping away everything they did and saying start over. You certainly embrace the good things and are gentle with the things that need to be fixed.
Yeah. So, Chris, I have a little bit of a political question for you, but I would be very frustrated at myself if I didn't ask this, because this is continually a area of fascination to me, being that it's I think there's a lot of conversation around the subject. How do you feel about the proliferation of screenwriting books? Obviously, as you mentioned, when you started out in your career, there was very little guidance, there was very little material, and your own book was in many ways an answer to that. But now we're in a time when pretty much anyone, through the power of the internet, can kind of profess that they're an expert and bring out a book and a seminar. And there is a certain amount of cynicism within the industry as a result of that. Do you feel that the world needs more screenwriting books or less screenwriting books?
Well, I think, we have saturation about that right now, but there is a value in the sort of fine dicing and slicing of things. I mean, that's what I'm seeing now. I am part of a generation that worked out the basic theories and put them into books because, as I said, there weren't any books before. So myself, Linda Sager, John Truby, Michael Haig, our late colleague Sid Field, all these people sort of wrote down the unwritten rules, and so that's pretty solid stuff. And so many books are derivative of those. But what is valuable is the specialized things where people tell you. John Truby is particularly good about this, about slicing it down to the level of, okay, romantic comedies and female-dominated romantic comedies and how to write heroes and villains and how, all these kind of specialized things are needed because those are particular refinements of the art form, and they keep changing because we have new requirements, new needs in the audience, and new forms, and so you need books that crack into these more specialized areas.
That's a very interesting and generous answer. Well, Chris, we're about to enter our final act in which we're going to be getting some of your top recommendations. But before we do so, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors.
Certainly.
When you're putting together that masterpiece movie, the coloring is a major creative decision. It can make the difference between whether the audience interprets your story as warm, cold, dark, or light, and it can help define the genre of the film. Here's a quick tip. Horror movies tend to have blue tones. Romantic comedies tend to have warm tones. Apocalyptic movies tend to be gray and washed out. Movies in which reality is off kilter tend to have green tones. And action movies tend to feature a lot of teal and orange, particularly in their artwork. The Emmy Award-winning Da Vinci Resolve from Blackmagic will help you get that perfect color for your next production. The Da Vinci Resolve 12 combines professional non-linear video editing with the world's most advanced color corrector, so you can now edit, color correct, finish, and deliver all from one system. The Da Vinci Resolve is completely scalable and resolution independent, so it can be used on set, in a small studio, or integrated into the largest Hollywood production pipeline. From creative editing and multi-camera television production to high-end finishing and color correction, only Da Vinci Resolve features the creative tools, compatibility, speed, and legendary image quality that you need to manage your entire workflow, which is why it is the #1 solution used on Hollywood feature films. Chris, welcome to the final act where you'll be sharing incredible resources and mind-blowing answers. Are you ready?
I am, yes.
So, Chris, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I have the good fortune, everything I do is based on the work of a man named Joseph Campbell, and I found his work. He wasn't thinking about movies. He was thinking about psychology and ancient mythology, but his work was an influence on me and George Lucas and many other people, obviously. But I met him once, and he just took my hand and pumped it. And he said he knew what I was doing, that I was trying to apply his academic ideas to the practical world of storytelling and movie making. And he said, "Young man, go with this stuff. This will take you a long way." And more generally, I've taken that as advice to just keep going on the path you're on. You're interested in something, you're fascinated by it, follow it. I mean, that was paraphrasing his famous statement, "Follow your bliss." You write the genres that you love. You tell the stories about things that move you deeply, and you just get in tune with your own emotions, and that'll take you a long way.
It feels almost like that quintessential scene in a movie where the protagonist meets his mentor and kind of has that knighting moment. It seems a very apt situation for you to have had in your life.
Yeah, it was an electrifying moment. It definitely was a big turning point and like a blessing and a launch off into the next part of my career. Yeah.
So, Chris, if you had, say, one movie to stake your entire career on, I would imagine in your case, a script that you needed to select, what kind of script would it be, and what talent would you want attached?
Well, I would like to be associated with something big on the scale of Gladiator or Ben-Hur or something like that, Knights of the Round Table, something really huge. I love all that, knights and banners and castles and, ancient times. And I'd want to cast the best of the old lions and the best of the young lions. So I'd want Anthony Hopkins and Sean Connery and people like that, and then I'd want Chris Hemsworth and Jennifer Lawrence to be the young leads and just have a big epic.
I would go
Ball.
see that. I mean, that sounds like an
Yeah.
amazing movie. Sign me
Yeah,
up. I
yeah.
will go buy my ticket right now.
Yeah, that's good casting. Hemsworth and Lawrence, at least, I think.
Yes.
That'd get you in, and then Sean Connery too.
Oh, sounds great. Well, Chris, obviously you've written extensively, but if you could recommend one book for our listeners other than maybe your own, what would it be and why?
Well, this is a little from left field, and I'm speaking here to those particularly who are maybe going to follow my path, which is not so much on writing. I've written, but it's for me it was more about analyzing the work of others and trying to help the studios, make the best picture. And this might be somebody working for a producer or an agent or an actor or in some development area. But the book I would point you to is the Reader's Encyclopedia. It's called Benet's Reader's Encyclopedia, and it's simply an alphabetical list of literary themes and authors and books and movements in literature and prize winners and so forth. And that's just the greatest random reading. You just open just crack the book open anywhere and read the two facing pages, and you'll get 20 different movie ideas, story ideas from the works of others, from ancient literature and modern literature. It's just a fantastic resource.
That sounds amazing. So it's kind of an index of literature.
Yeah, it's we call the Reader's Encyclopedia. And I'll give you one more. There's a book called Memo from David O. Selznick, which is a collection of memos by Selznick, who produced Gone with the Wind and many other important pictures. And it's a comprehensive guide to film producing. I mean, it's everything. He's got letters to Hitchcock. He writes about costumes and sets and script and actors and every possible aspect. So that's another good one.
That sounds fantastic. I wonder if the day's going to come in a few years where we have a compilation of emails.
Right. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, sure.
Well, Film Talk Nation, I know that you love audio. To thank you for joining us today, we partnered with our friends over at Audible to offer you a free audiobook. Great titles available include Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling and Your Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. If you haven't already done so, you can claim your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/film talk. That's audibletrial.com/film talk. And this link will also be included in today's show notes. Chris, if you could recommend just one movie for our listeners, what would it be and why?
The movie that I use in my class a lot because it's so rich is Hitchcock's Notorious. I'm a huge fan of Hitchcock. I learned so much from him, and that one, he was just on top of his form, and there are these brilliant inventions in it and things that he does only in that film in visual language, like he has Cary Grant turning his head to the audience, the back of his head or the side of his head, or you don't see his eyes a lot of the time, and that means something. That means he's not telling the truth, or he's trying to make up his mind about something, or he's in danger of temptation, and it's just a wonderful visual library of concepts.
And is there maybe a website or an app that you use a lot that you find helpful within your trade that you would recommend?
Yeah, because I like the epic stuff so much. The Los Angeles Times has a part of their website called the Hero Complex, and it's a great source for articles about upcoming movies and scripts, especially in the big hero area. And I also I write with music a lot. When I actually have a writing assignment on a script, I put on some music, and I use YouTube and Pandora a lot. And there's a little app called YouTube MP3 where you can actually grab the soundtrack from any YouTube and store it, or capture it as a file, and then I have a nice library of mostly movie soundtracks that I like to listen to.
What kind of music do you listen to when you write?
It's dependent on the script itself. Like I worked on a script, a big epic for a Chinese animation company, and I found a Dmitri Tiomkin score from the 1950s called Land of the Pharaohs, and it was just perfect. There's a huge march at the beginning where the triumphant pharaoh comes back from his conquests, and it's ridiculously over the top, and it was just bombastic and big enough for my ancient Chinese story, and it was a good match.
It's interesting. I've heard of a number of writers say that finding that right score, that right track, can just make a real difference in getting the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, it's a rhythm that you pick up from it, and man, that definitely does land on the page. People read the prose and they go, "Wow, this is galloping along. What is it? What are you doing?" And it's because you've absorbed that musical form.
Yeah,
Great.
that and caffeine.
Yes, true.
So, Chris, I know you are teaching frequently. I feel that there's probably a lot of people listening to this who feel much like myself that they would gladly listen to you teach on screenwriting for a day or two or three. How can our audience connect with you?
Well, I'm traveling mostly to Europe these days, but you can check my website, which is thewritersjourney.com, for upcoming things. I'm going to do one in New York sometime in February. That's a rare thing in the States. And I do something called the Story Expo every year, and just do a short presentation there. That's in Los Angeles. So you could look up Story Expo. That's a good way to find me in the States. And then I'm doing things in London and Europe, in France this year, in Paris in April. So those are some of the possibilities.
And anyone who's interested, I would highly recommend that they beat a rapid path to your website, because I know that your conferences and seminars have a tendency to sell out very, very quickly. You're someone who's much under demand, so that's definitely something that people need to jump on sooner rather than later. Well, Chris, it's time for the martini shot. What parting piece of guidance would you like to share with us?
Well, I'll just share something I heard once in Maine. In Maine, they were very dry, and they have a funny way of talking. The famous statement is, "You can't get there from here." But I heard a variation of that when I was lost, looking for the house of a famous painter, Winslow Homer, on an island. And my wife forced me to get out of the car and ask directions, which, men don't like to do. But there was nobody to ask except a young man was working on his car by the side of the road, and his feet were sticking out under the car. So I went over reluctantly and said, "How do I get to Winslow Homer's house?" And he rolled out from under the car, and he looked at me and he said, "Just keep going till you get there." And I thought, wow, that's great. That's universal advice. So
Yeah.
I give you that advice. Just keep going till you get there. Whatever your goal is, it's going to take steps. Going to take specific actions, and a lot of them, maybe 10,000 of them, but just start making those steps and keep going till you get there. So that's my best capsule of advice for you.
I love it. Well, that is great advice from a great man. Well, that's a wrap, Film Talk Nation. In this industry, you're only as good as the people you know. And today you've been hanging out with Chris Vogler and myself. If you want to go the extra mile, head over to filmtalkpodcast.com and type Chris Vogler into the search bar. The show notes from today's show will appear along with everything we discussed, like Chris's recommended book and movie. Chris, we appreciate you sharing your priceless insight with us today. Film Talk Nation thanks you, and we'll see you on the red carpet.
All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy it.